Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Marcus Ratnathakam. I will be the host today of this continuation in a series that Reese Jones started, I think maybe 3 weeks ago now, or three episodes ago now, at least, on artificial intelligence and kind of broadly speaking, the, what is artificial intelligence and the kind of intersection and interplay between artificial intelligence and kind of humanity as we think about it, and human expression and human fulfillment. And I think he's talked in past episodes, maybe a bit briefly, on the Eros Sutras. The Eros Sutras being a body of text written by Nicole Daedone, previously founder of One Taste, a woman who's very interested in kind of the ideas of humanity, social justice, and kind of optimal human flourishing, should we say. And this text is a encoding of her philosophy, and a pretty voluminous set of texts that we'll talk a little bit more about later in this episode. But I introduced this to introduce the topic of this episode before I'll introduce Matt next to me, which is artificial intelligence and the Eros Sutras, and some of the work that's being done here at the Eros Monastery on using artificial intelligence with the philosophy of Eros and the Eros Sutras, and kind of some exciting things we're working about and what we're discovering along the way. So all of this to introduce the next kind of hour of content that we have for you. We'll be doing some discussion. We'll be doing some Q&A. So there'll be plenty of time for anybody to ask questions or introduce ideas that you would maybe want Matt, who I'll introduce momentarily, or Reese to discuss further. So what am I doing here? Real briefly, I'm the president of Soulmaker Press, which is the publishing company that is publishing the bulk of Nicole's writing, including the Eros Sutras. And we've been kind of systematically getting these through copy editing and the whole machine of literary industry, and have actually just completed the volume 1 principles. And so we're starting to now bring more conversations around the sutras into the world. And Reese so graciously invited me to host this episode of his podcast. Next to me here is Matt Pelletier. So Matt's background is in computer science, philosophy, leveraging technology to improve the human experience. He's been doing this at several related companies that I've been involved with, including One Taste, for I guess about 8 years or so now. And most recently has been doing this with the Eros Sutras and AI, which we'll talk about a bit. And then I think everybody who comes to Reese's talk knows Reese Jones to my far left. And Reese comes here with his background in biophysics for human brain research and exponential technologies, including Singularity University. So I guess I should be welcoming myself since it's Reese's podcast, but also welcome to you guys. And is there anything you guys would like to add to kind of our introduction of the topic today, or to what either of you guys are working on before we kind of jump in?
So this session is a bit about what is AI publishing, and that's in contrast to book publishing, but that's not using AI to publish, but publishing wisdom and content and ideas in AI databases itself that you would interact with either as a conversation with a chat, or as something like a wiki, and that it's kind of an emerging form of publishing. And then we've built an example that Matt will talk about. Next slide. Publishing itself is, how do you communicate ideas? An idea, a book is an idea, maybe a complex idea, but it's an idea. It's not paper. And it's often published in the form of paper, but the publishing is an idea. And then an anthology or a collection of books, or a publisher might have a collection that they've made that is essentially a wisdom that they're trying to bring to the world. And so there's obviously many books, millions of books. Most are not very accessible. And then there's thousands of different publishers who bring these books to the marketplace. And that's kind of the traditional model of publishing. The web, about 30 years old now, is a way of publishing pages on the internet, and the pages can be linked together in books. But the links between the pages is part of the publishing, and you're not controlling all of the pages like you would in writing and publishing a book, but you're linking your publication in a web of other ideas that might have generated from somewhere else. And a common publication on the internet is Wikipedia, where the authors of the articles that are on the pages of Wikipedia are essentially user generated, and they can link to each other, and it's essentially a neutral point of view, collection of wisdom published on the internet, accessible to anybody and editable by anybody. And it's trying to maintain a neutral point of view without a bias to one point of view or another. The largest set of records is in English, and they can have hyperlinks and a sort of editorial process where people can write, you could write an article about any topic you choose, publish it onto Wikipedia, and then other people would agree or disagree about what you've written there. And over time, it evolves to be close to a consensus reality, or truth from a point of view, a consensus point of view. And it's kind of reliable in that regard, because anybody can go in and edit it if it's wrong. And this gets into bias and other kinds of things. And then Google, whose mission is to organize all the world's information, which includes Wikipedia and the web and other publications, and make it useful and searchable. And this is evolving into also including videos such as YouTube and so forth. And so this is ways of taking a wisdom or collected wisdom and presenting it to the worldwide public in easily accessible, self-healing or improving ways. And this you can search through, which is Google, which people are familiar with. And it's becoming recently more able to do cognitive processing of the database, like what does it mean, more than what are the words there. Computational type of things like Stephen Wiltram's Mathematica and other things, which are interpreting what's there and making computations on it. And then in the news, as we talk about in this series, generative AI is taking computation and cognitive understanding of the database and turning it into new communications about a question you might have. And so this is creating fiction, which is, for example, a story about something that might happen in the future, and whether that is validated in sort of scientific process of into fact is whether the predictions of the model of the cognitive AI turn out to test with reality well. And so these are things we've talked about in other episodes. And 20 years ago, one of the first books about Google was titled Search, and they asked the founders of Google, at that time, what do you think the future of search is going to be? And they answered was that the future of search will be a conversation with somebody you trust. And so do you trust the internet more than any person that you know? And how would you best understand what it is that it answers? And that's a conversation where you can make a question, but if the question isn't quite focused enough, it becomes a conversation. And so this is the future of search coming. Next slide. And so one of the things important to humans is sort of life philosophy, where how do we live? How do we solve problems? And there's many forms of life philosophy that are often called paths, like what is your spiritual path or your path through life? How do you, address your needs and solve your problems and such things? And so paths are like a path to enlightenment or a path to success are what are the obstacles to avoid and the steps to take and the goals and practices to navigate your path. A popular one is called the way, which might be the Dharma or in Buddhism, or the way of God in Christianity, or it's kind of a way through life. The Buddhists have practices that they call Dharma talks, where they meet on a regular basis with a teacher who discusses the path, like making tea, to clearing brush for fire safety, to relationship struggles, to financial struggles. These are all things that can be discussed in a Dharma talk of the way or the path through life. Different philosophies organize these kind of, or document these kind of paths, not always in a narrative story with characters, but in little bits of wisdom that are often organized into sutras. So the Yoga Sutras are a collection of ways of looking at reality and other people, and that can be turned into stories, each one. And these nuggets of wisdom are organized into with titles and long lists that any one of them could be a book or a movie or whatever, but the collection of them is sort of a wisdom of sutras. And the Yoga Sutras are an embodied collection of wisdom that most closely associated with Tibetan Buddhism and Buddhism in general. And it's a way of documenting the set of wisdom. And about 20 years ago, Nicole set out to develop a set of sutras on the ways of Eros and how people relate to each other, and Eros being the most fundamental biological drive of humans, which is the erotic energy that leads to the creation of more humans and the survival of those that are doing that. And so the Eros Sutras has been led by Nicole, or written over 20 years' time, with the contribution of hundreds that try and document and simplify the complex topic of Eros into little nuggets of insights that help you navigate a path through life. And some would call this a left-handed path, and a left-handed path, as opposed to the right-handed path, is about 90% of people are right-handed, but 10% are not, and they come at some types of things like combat or understanding life from a sort of a slightly different point of view that's sometimes better. And the left-handed path, people like to say, is once started, must be completed, and as a left-handed path. And so many of these sutras that describe going through a path can be best embodied with practices like daily practices like yoga or meditation or other things that help you not just cognitively think about a principle in a sutra, but actually live it and embody it in how you make your tea or how you start your day, that type of thing. And so the practices are something that the Eros collection of efforts are try to do to embody these sutras into a life path. Next slide, please. And so religions, historical religions, use the technologies of their times. And before there was writing, religions were around storytelling from a teacher with oral traditions, and the practices were an important vehicle for people to learn material by doing it. And because there wasn't a written record and there wasn't internet that you could ask questions of, there were teachers and there were ways of memorizing things which are easier memorized if they're included in an embodied practice, that your body remembers things as well as your mind. And so oral traditions, teachers who carried the information across time through lineages were the tradition of and the technologies used by sort of classical religions, and that these had kind of a improvement with writing, that you could record the essence of the religion, sometimes in sutras, sometimes in stories, and put them on scrolls and then into paper books, which were more portable, and other mechanisms to help people communicate them more broadly and reproduce them more consistently and effectively. And music is another container structure that you can put wisdom in that communicates across time well. And these, before there was kind of a lot of writing and computers used teachers organized in churches, which is gatherings for community to communicate these kind of paths and life philosophies and practices and sutras and so forth. And this technology to make it easier to communicate these things is improving exponentially with these new types of technologies. And so teachers and practices are a traditional way to communicate ideas and wisdom, but having access to libraries like the Library of Alexander or religions often kept essentially records and books of the community and the wisdom and the teachings and so forth, that in the technology of the time, which are like physical books and physical libraries and churches and monasteries and so forth. And these are becoming digitized and becoming better to store in databases from which you can do computation and cognition electronically, so that what's in the database and what it means can be analyzed by people, but it can also be amplified by computing processes. So this allows search to instantly find anything in very large databases. And then they have large language models, which is an example being ChatGPT, but there's many others coming from many companies, as we've talked about. And these are language models that learn from the language that's there and can generate a summary of what it's learned. And so you can take lots of complex stuff and simplify it into a simple answer. And this is what ChatGPT does, which, as we've talked about, is a fancier version of type ahead in Google search that can give you summaries or translations or transformations of ideas that come from large amounts of data, but simplified and customized and personalized for you, like to your answering your questions. And these tools like ChatGPT, you can use them in a conversation in a chat bot, but they also have APIs. And on the APIs is an application programming interface where you can plug it into specialized data, where we'll talk about it, that we've chosen to take the Eros Sutras and build them as a data model that's plugged into the ChatGPT language model that makes it more expert in the topic of Eros Sutras and the life path of Eros. And you can then build apps on top of that, where you could have a conversation by typing, but ultimately you can put an avatar of a anthropomorphic character that you have a verbal conversation with, and then that character can be a character in a movie and so on. So this is kind of the context of how these things fit into wisdom, life paths, and religions. Next slide, please. And so now I'll turn it over to Matt, who's actually building this, to explain how it works and what he's doing.
Thanks. So yeah, it's if you even just pay attention at all to the AI community, there's so many things happening so fast, and not just new products are coming out or new technologies, but the rate of change, the number of research papers, the number of big, large language models that are coming out are just explosive. They're literally exponential. And so even the people who are on top, inside the industry, on top of the news, can't pay attention to all of it. And so one of the things that we're, so in a sense, it's kind of not just a golden age of AI, which is what a lot of the AI people will say, but I think we're in a golden age of human evolution, because we're getting to now create kind of a partner in a way that we haven't had before, an intellectual partner, in the very least. We've never had, as Reese has covered in some of his other talks, we've never had another intellectual sparring partner as humans, not for as long as we've, had recorded history. And so we're watching it happen now. And it's just stunning to observe. And there's a lot of fear about it, and people make a lot of hay about it, but it's also an incredibly promising, incomprehensible period that we're in. And even if you just look at, ChatGPT came out in October. Google rushed to release its own model. Facebook, a few months later, Facebook released or was leaked an open source model. And then progressively, the amount of money it takes to train these and the techniques that are used to train them, so the efficiency with learning how to take the technology and then do new things with it, has been on an upward swing. And within, Stanford has taken the Facebook model and then added stuff to it. And other open source companies, people wearing pajamas in their homes on the other side of the world, have taken it and made it run on phones. These are systems that cost tens of millions of dollars to train and months to train. And people were suddenly taking them and figuring out little hacks because they were now open source and in the world, and then making them more efficient, making them faster, making them smarter. and doing things with them that no one at those big companies who have lots of bureaucracy and agendas of their own that hadn't thought of. And so this is obviously deeply compelling to us because we have, with the Eros Sutras, we have something that's something of a staggering work of profound human knowledge and wisdom. And not just in the sense of ancient wisdom, but in the sense of new wisdom, in the sense that it's communicating at a level that speaks to current humanity. It's not ancient practices that are confusing. It's based on a life philosophy that is, I think, incredibly accessible and available to all humans. One of the things that I love the most about the sutras is the way that it speaks at the kind of level of the psyche, the mechanics of the psyche. And so that's the exact kind of material that speaks at the exact layer of, let's say, basic motive forces in a human. We want to teach that to this new technology that's emerging, because it is quickly going to be talking back to us in a way that we have never been spoken back to yet. And so one of the, just to speak a little specifically about what we're doing with building an AI. Right now, we've got the first basic version of a sutra-informed AI, which is to say, we've got OpenAI's best-in-class large language model, and we have fed it the sutras and taught a chatbot to take people's questions, look for the most relevant material, put it together in a certain way, send it to OpenAI and ChatGPT, and then have a conversation with the person. I'll do a demo in a little bit. And it is amazing just to watch what the most simple, that is a simple little thing that we've put together. It is fascinating to see how powerful that can be. Just to be able to take a huge body of work, it's over 1,000 pages worth of material, and be able to just summarize it instantly, speak at different levels of abstraction in a way that's relevant to the person asking the question. So for all the reasons that people love ChatGPT, it works instantly in a profound way with material that is otherwise challenging to read. It's powerful and as I said, accessible, but it's not like you're reading a newspaper article. You're reading about the very inner workings of your mind, all your relationships, the worldview that you came in with when you first started reading them. It's a lot to take in. And so being able to have something that can instantly take that material, take your direct question, and then answer it at a level of abstraction that makes sense, or reiterate it after you adjust it a little to speak in a way that makes sense, is there's never been anything like that before. And so just if we had nothing else, if that was the end of the line with where AI can go, that would be world changing. But what's actually happening is, the large language models have now become so big, they've ingested, I don't remember how many years away it's predicted, but such a huge portion of known written material in the world that they will reach the end. All the world's known written material, everything on the internet and everything in written materials has nearly already been exhausted as far as mining it and putting it into these models. And so video is now being mined. OpenAI released an audio to text tool that they built just so they could listen and watch all the video in the world and also put that into the machine. And so, in order to continue to make these, make these large language models wiser and more capable and more versatile for the millions of different needs for people out there, for business world and for, personal spiritual exploration and liberation, we want them to genuinely get at the deepest possible level the wisdom. And so for us, in a way, the sutras are, there's nothing better than the sutras. That's the perfect thing to teach AI. And there's a lot of arguments in the AI community around whether, these AIs are just extremely sophisticated statistical machines that are rearranging things that have already been written and said and just presenting it. And most people think it's interesting because they've never seen that arrangement before. And so the idea is there's no real wisdom. It's just regurgitated knowledge that's novel. I don't know that that's true, because you could make the same argument about the human mind. And so obviously that's a huge topic that'll be borne out in the next coming years. But I think our goal would be to, the next version that we're working on is to take, not just to kind of add something on top of ChatGPT so it knows about the sutras, but to actually use the sutras as training data to train its deeper semantic level, which is how these models are trained, to understand the mechanical relationships that the sutras talk about in a way that informs the rest of its training. And so, and like I said, that's becoming, we would have needed, I don't know, 10 or $20 million and a team of 100 engineers a year ago. And now you probably need a tenth of that. And in another year, you'll probably need a tenth of that in order to do that. And so it's moving very quickly. And so, yeah, I'll do a little demo now, and then I think we can take some questions. So this is just our site, Eros platform, and we've got the chatbot in here. We could say, how can Eros Sutras help me improve my relationships? Yeah, and so even just something this simple, it's scanning around, finding what's relevant to your question, giving you a personal answer. Can you say? Right, and so you just instantly have access to the staggering power of an all-purpose machine, which is something like a extremely precocious 4-year-old.
You read a little bit for people listening.
Yeah, so it says, I asked, how can the Eros Sutras help me improve my relationships? And it said, the Eros Sutras offer guidance on how to approach relationships in a way that can lead to deeper intimacy and connection. For example, Sutra 238 suggests that liberation of self and other is what would hold the relationship together, and that this requires intensive and difficult work. Sutra 309 advises us to go precisely to the areas where we tend to get stuck or lost in order to learn from them and eventually transition into more fulfilling relationships. And Sutra 327 emphasizes the importance of communication that describes the present moment in detail rather than relying on preconceived responses. Overall, the Eros Sutras encourage us to approach relationships with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to do the work necessary to deepen our connections with others. So obviously this is conversational, and opens the door to further questions. This would be a starting point for, well, tell me more about intimacy and connection, or why do I have to have a willingness to do the work necessary, and why is it intensive and difficult work? And that's what makes it incredibly personal. And I could ask it to speak in another language. I could ask it to speak at a higher level of abstraction. I could give it specific examples.
What happens if you ask it maybe a more personal question, like if you try to ask it a question that, let's say, you would ask a friend?
Yeah, so we could say, right now I'm having some difficulty when I get into a fight with my brother. He thinks that I should express more emotion, but I'm afraid he won't like it. What should I do? I've never asked this before. Okay, so this is good. So this is actually more of a boilerplate ChatGPT answer. And so one of this is not a particularly sutra type answer. This is more of a like therapy response. And so it didn't give me the answer that I would prefer it give, but it points to the reason that we want to actually train the next version of the model to be more, let's say, more deeply grasping the underlying mechanics of how to work with yourself and how to work with other people than you get with a standard ChatGPT, because ChatGPT, they built the version that you can use now, GPT-4, was actually built last summer. They completed training it last summer, and then they spent 6 months filtering its responses so that it was sanitized, clean, not telling people how to build pipe bombs, not giving bad advice, not telling someone a plan for how to amplify hate speech online. And so they did a lot of work to kind of filter it down. And so we've noticed that because the work of the sutras deals largely with your limbic brain, your emotional system, and how you relate to other people, anything that starts to veer in toward, let's say, a risky answer, we've noticed ChatGPT will steer you toward, why don't you just express your feelings and talk to a therapist? And so this is important for us because we have a lot to say about this. And so the kind of democratization and what would you say, like the effects of open sourcing this technology and the economies of scale that come with having a lot of very smart, very eager engineers working on this stuff is we can now, with an incredibly doable amount of resources, train a sophisticated artificial intelligence to understand what we do.
So because your first question was kind of theoretical, and this question was a little more kind of personal. And as you were writing your question, I was thinking, oh, that I could see someone in a say sitting with a priest in a church. Exactly. Asking that question. I could see someone sitting with a therapist in a therapist room asking that question, or like sitting with a friend and asking that question. And I wondered maybe to Reese, like around, you were talking about religions use the technologies of their time. Do you, do you see people using, do you see people, is it true that people use the technologies of their time to improve their personal lives? And do you see that happening with AI? And what do you see as the role? I mean, if AI is another tool that people go to better their lives, improve their lives, wrestle with the existential things that people wrestle with, what do you see emerging with using AI and as a tool?
Well, an exciting thing is people have their own personal struggles and dialogues, their worries that they're concerned about, and they'd like to ask another person about, maybe a trusted person like a therapist or a priest but they're too embarrassed to ask that question, and they and it might be 2 a.m. and they can't sleep and they're struggling with the question. So even if they could ask another person, the other person isn't necessarily available. And so this creates a whole way that you can get perspective on your struggles and your fears and your worries with privacy anytime, anywhere, but also ask it a chat that's been trained on you, so it can be much more personal, communicate in the language you choose and at the level that you're interested in. And so it's another new thing that you can work into your intimate life, in your deepest, darkest secrets that you may not want to share with any other person, to get some perspective and maybe calm your fears and maybe help your mental health in ways that weren't possible before. It doesn't prevent you from talking to a therapist or a religion or a friend or your family or these kind of things. It might even advise you to do that. But it creates a new possibility for people who are struggling or just curious.
It's we're talking about limbic resonance, and you're mentioning, an AI that's suited for you. It talks to you in a language that, like an AI talks to me in a language that is suited for me. And so I immediately feel some more limbic resonance with the AI, and then seeing in the prompt where it kind of what you're saying, where it senses that an answer may be difficult or dangerous in a sense to suggest something, and so it kind of veers away from responding, and it's almost like that's kind of the edge of limbic resonance that we're seeing the chat model want to engage with, or able to engage with, or is trained to engage with today. Does that sound true to you guys as an assessment of that?
Well, it's a little tricky with the word limbic resonance, and that a resonance implies two different limbic systems that are resonating together. And AIs don't have a body, so they don't have a limbic system exactly. And so they can learn to perform a limbic resonance from what it's learned about humans' limbic systems. But at this point, it's a little bit more cognitive than it is physical. And so it's a resonance between the cognition of the AI and yourself, and you embody that in your limbic system, that this is a fear, and the AI may know cognitively, well, what does a fear mean in those people over there? And I will respond appropriately, but it's not feeling it in the same way as another person that you can touch. And that level of touch will evolve as the technology gets better. But it's like two different species that are like equally matched on cognitive, but are trying to communicate about something that might also be physical, that the AI can't physically feel in a resonant way, the same way another person could, but it can be extra smart to fake it.
And there's also an argument that you don't really need to have, that if the experience is all just for you, meaning you as the human, it just has to be indistinguishable in order to feel resonant, because you're only feeling yourself anyway. In the sense that if you have a question, you're feeling vulnerable. If you feel like you actually were able to communicate it, it felt like it landed in wherever that is, if it's another person or an AI. All that matters is that happened, and that you can have kind of a relationship, but all that relationship is still happening inside you. And so even if it can be simulated or whatever we want to call it at some point, we'll just think of it as another species. What matters is your experience. And so, one of the many things that are being discussed in the AI community is I think Yan LeCun, who runs AI for Meta, or is a major figure of research there, and kind of a pioneer of AI, said, think of it this way. If you follow the triune brain models, you've got the cortex and limbic system, and then the reptile brain. I know it's not the same, it's not widely adopted anymore, but if you just follow that thinking, he said, the limbic system is what controls the cortex in humans, but we don't have a limbic system in AI. You just have a cortex. And so you're trying to have a cortex control a cortex. And so that has to be addressed somehow. And so for that reason, I think it's one of the reasons that it's tricky terrain for big companies, especially for-profit big companies, to enter risky territory. It's one of the reasons that Microsoft released a chatbot, I think 4 years ago, and it was taken down after 2 days because people just were able to trigger it into hate speech, and it was saying racist shit and should not be kept on. That faucet needed to be turned off, and so they turned it off and shuttered it. And then people forgot about it until ChatGPT came out, and people were like, "Oh my God, we finally got here. How is this thing so amazing?" When another thing was just a troll after an hour and a half. And it's because OpenAI spent a ton of money and a ton of time making sure that thing behaved. And so it won't enter risky territory. And as soon as you get into, let's say, the limbic domain of emotions, you're in risky territory. And it's not just because it can become a, flame bait writing robo troll. It's because emotions are complicated and people may not like it, and they're going to get triggered. It's
such a great corollary or just kind of mirror for, humanity. I mean, one of the premises of Eros is basically that, our humanity that's so, can be so challenging for people, like, love, passion, hate, rage, lust, all these things that, while there are many, let's say, spiritual paths that kind of say, avoid those, or in a sense, rise above those as a way to enlightenment, as a way to peace, as a way to fulfillment. Eros says, no, descend into those, that it's the urge to kind of contain and suppress those that make those emotions so volatile. But if you actually embrace them, they become not only contributive to your life, they become actually the path to any kind of ultimate fulfillment. And so it seems like, in a way, that kind of wrestle with is being mirrored in how our chat GPTs are being trained.
Yeah, if the internet is kind of a shadow for the psyche, these chatbots are like the shadow of the shadow for the psyche. And so they instantly become reactive because we're instantly reactive on the internet. And the internet and the chat GPT and all the other models were trained on the content of the internet. So it's a little surprise that it's reflecting back what we've got in here that we can't tamper down, when we're actually seeing people face to face.
That's really good. All right. So let's take a second then for some questions. I see a hand in the room, and then Hisham, after Kathleen in the room, you can let us know if anyone online has a question. This one?
Okay, thank you so much for that, you guys. It was very interesting to hear about. So some of the things that came up when I was listening was, though I've had lots of experiences in my life where I've been by myself reading a book and felt soothed and comforted by somebody else's words in that moment. And that was absolutely a genuine connection. It felt like a connection happened. That person put their wisdom out and I received it at another point in time. So that happens. But, in Eros, at least my understanding is the body, the body is the one that is in charge and the mind has to follow. So it feels like here's like a hyper mind. And if there isn't, that the mind is like relating to this hyper mind, and then what happened to the body, because the body is the one that is, this whole body of work came out of somebody's lived experience. This is a wisdom path, and wisdom is not just information. My teacher used to always say that you can't be a Dharma teacher and just give people information. It has to be something that you have digested and lived, and you can then offer it. And that's somehow what people can benefit from, because otherwise, become a scholar or read a book. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not the same as a living being. And I was also thinking that, there are plenty of experiences that people have had where, there are inanimate objects, holy objects that become enlivened because of people's connection to the object, right? I would assume that I don't know how it happens. Does some kind of soul of some kind incarnate within that statue or that rock or that thing? But it has a life to it. And I don't think we're there yet at all with the AIs right now, where there's like enough attention towards it so that it could actually draw that kind of a being. I don't know. I mean, these are speculating, but I'm thinking about these things because I feel like it's clearly, we're moving in that direction very quickly. But my biggest concern, I think, was the where's the body? where's the body? Where's the wisdom of the body in this? And if we are trying to have the mind follow the body, and then now we've got a mind that's like, we could accidentally follow this hyper mind with this mind, then we're two abstractions away from reality.
Maybe ask the AI.
Try that. It'll steer away.
Ask it.
So the Eros AI is live on the Eros platform now. You can try it yourself. It's like a product announcement. So do ask questions of this nature. The sort of saving grace of that problem is AIs don't have a body, and so they don't have a limbic system to resonate with, and they don't have lived experience because they haven't lived in the biological sense. However, they're trained on language that came from embodied living beings. That is what impregnated the internet with all of the language that the AIs have learned from. And that language has the fears and the feelings and much of the subconscious bodily expressed ideas that people feel. And so that kind of balances out the fact that the AI itself doesn't have the body to resonate with.
Well, AIs will have bodies soon. And that's coming, and they can actually learn from other bodies by watching them and learning how to be a body as well as language. So large language models are not only going to be language, they're also going to deal with bodies. We've seen many of that in movies, but that's going to happen in real life over the next couple of years. And it's happening exponentially.
Thank you, Ray. You're truly an expert in this area, and we're talking about also things like kissing, things like touch, things like a racing heart when somebody you love touches you. That's something that even as an AI gets a robot body or learns very sophisticated ways of how to behave like it has a limbic resonance, it's not the same phenomenon as touch. It's a simulation of all of the meaning of touch. And so it's an uncharted territory of how Turing-like an AI body will be compared to a human with a body. And you can have a limbic resonance with your dog and feel loving limbic connection with the dog, but the dog is limited in its cognitive dialogue. So it's a complicated area.
Yeah, but I mean, these are going to go exponentially. So they'll reach a dog level and then reach a human level and then go way beyond a human level. And we'll be able to connect with them, and we'll also go beyond a human level.
Were there, I think we have time for one more question, maybe a quick one. Russell, go ahead.
Russell.
Thank you. I'll make this short. It seems to me that the first thing I thought was like you asked the question and then it said based on the context. And I said, well, it needs to ask another question. And so there's a dialogue going on. That dovetailed into the second thing, which is like what Kathleen is saying. Sometimes when I'm listening to somebody, I'm interested in what their life experience is because I'm interested in their motivation, because that's what I use to trust what the answer is based on. And the curiosity is not far from making the chat hungry or giving it motivation, or like, yes, I want to kiss you, or no, I don't want to be in the room with you. And that is the dangerous part about chat AI. If I'm just looking at the World Book or the Britannica and I get this sort of neutral body of information, it's a place to start. But if I'm going to develop a relationship with someone, I'm interested in like, how are they like me? Or do we want to do the same thing together? Do they get excited when we talk? And I just think that's a great area to develop. So the short thing is making AI ask questions.
That's right. And it kind of brings up the issue of the theory of mind, which is from psychology of how well you understand what another person is thinking. And we've talked about that in a previous session, that in order to simulate what another person is thinking, you have a lot of the machinery that you run it in your body, in your mind, in your limbic system, as to, well, they just stubbed their toe, they're likely feeling pain. I've felt pain like that before. I can know that distresses my chest, and so their chest must be feeling, suffering from them stubbing their toe. And that's kind of a part of the more elaborate principles of how limbic resonance works and how psychotherapy works. And so this is
the question is, do we want to program AI to feel pain, to feel loneliness? It's just like, whoa, we're just trying to figure that out ourselves.
Well, why would we not want to?
Yeah, that's
All right.
the question.
I think we'll pause there as that's the top of the hour. Thank you so much. Thanks for having us on and showing the Eros AI on this talk. And thanks everybody for coming. And we will see you on the next episode. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.